here to bring the meeting here to Louise, of whom we are extremely fond, and she being our town historian besides, no more than right that we should. She does so much work in that line, and she has so much to tell us. We have a very small amount of business to transact. We very seldom have very much business, but I have received 2 communications, one of which is from the American Association of us, I believe, on the 300th anniversary of Dutchess County. This is an anniversary time. This one doesn't quite fit, but we just had the 100th anniversary of the birth of Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 250th anniversary of the birth of George Washington. Now the 300th anniversary of Dutchess County is coming up, and the anniversary of mine's coming up in between. So you a couple of weeks. So Louise,
Yes.
it's all yours.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm so happy and proud to see all you beautiful people here this evening. And I want to tell you a little about Dutchess County so that you can get an idea of how we ought to celebrate in 1983. You know, the first person to come over here with a boat was Henry Hudson. He came over in 1609 and sailed up the Hudson River with the Half Moon, a pretty little sailboat with nice billowing sails. And the Indians standing on the shore looked at the boat, and they thought it was a beautiful bird that had come down from the spirit world. Well, Hudson was in the employ of the Dutch East India Company, which was looking for a northwest passage to the Orient so that it could get a trade started with the beautiful things made in the Orient. So that is how he happened to come over here. And when he saw the mouth of the Hudson, he was sure he found a passage. But he got up almost as far as Albany, and he saw that he had a dead end. So he went back and out and around, but the new land was claimed for the Dutch, and it was called New Netherlands. Well, it turned out that the Dutch didn't care much for inland settlement. They wanted to settle along the waterways and the river. They even dug a canal across Manhattan to try to get some idea that they were in a country where there was lots of water. It came to pass that the New Netherlands wasn't settled very much. So in 1664, the British took over the whole New Netherlands without firing a shot. And then things began to happen. It was Thomas Dongan, who was the colonial governor and a very good one, that called an assembly of the Indians and the British and Americans in 1683 in August. And they had to sign a treaty with the Indians to make the province of New York, which that was what they called the land after they had taken it over from New Netherlands, was called the province of New York. And after the Indians had signed the treaty making the land legal for the British to settle, it was then on October 18th in 1683 that the land, the province, was divided into 12 counties, and one of them was Dutchess County. And how it got its name was that the Duke of York was James of York, and he was supposed to be the British governor, but he never came over here as far as I could find out. And some years before that, his wife had died, and he wanted another beautiful princess. So he sent a scout around to all the royal courts in Europe to find him a wife. And sure enough, in Italy, this scout found the beautiful Mary of Modena. She was only 14 years old, and she was studying to enter the convent. But King Louis of France wanted her to marry the Duke of York to bring the countries England and France together. So the Pope told her it was her duty to marry the Duke of York. She, as I said, was only 14, and they were married by proxy, whatever that is. And she went on her honeymoon on a beautifully decorated canal boat down the Seine River in France without her husband. That wouldn't be my idea of a honeymoon, but she seemed to like it. And they met in England at the end of those 2 months, and she became the Duchess of York. Well, when Charles II died, this beautiful girl, of course, became a Queen of England because the Duke of York became James II of England. And she was very beautiful, and years later, her daughter Mary also became the Queen of England when she married the Prince William of Orange. Now, with a beautiful duchess like that, having been the one in whose honor Dutchess County was named, it makes me think that Dutchess County is really going places. Well, time went on, and this first period was a large landowner period. And people came in, and a few people, not too many, because the landowners had a peculiar way of renting the land. They called it leasehold. A farmer would take a parcel of land, and he would build a house and a barn and clear the land for cultivation. And then along would come another farmer who could pay a higher rent, and the first farmer was pushed off without any recompense. This made very hard feelings and led to an anti-rent war. And there was one Irishman, William Prendergast, who couldn't stand that idea. He organized the farmers, about 300 of them, and when somebody came along to pay a higher rent on the farm and pushed off the farmer that was there, Prendergast and his men pushed off the one who was trying to get on. Well, that made more trouble. And the British sent a man up into the county to see what could be done. And this man met another very nice guy going along on a horse and rode with him. And he asked him if he could tell him where that Prendergast was. And the man gave him 2 nice answers, and they had a nice ride. And the British official found out that there was no use to go on any further. So he turned around and went back. And he never knew he'd been riding with Prendergast all the time. Well, Prendergast married a lovely Quaker girl, Mehitable Wing, and she was very peaceful. And she persuaded her husband to give himself up to the British, and that would stop this anti-rent war. This was now in 1765. And he didn't think it was a good idea, but he did it. And instead of the British officials just claiming him as a wonderful man to stop all the hostilities, they put him in jail. And he had to be tried for treason. Well, all the people on the jury were members of the landholder class, and there was no lawyer for him. And Mehitable, in those days before women lived, she got right in there and she tried to be his lawyer. But of course, everything was against her, and he was sentenced to be hung in 3 days in Poughkeepsie. Well, Mehitable had got him into it, so she was going to get him out. She got the strongest horse she could find, and she put her best linen dress with stripes on it in her saddlebag, and she rode as fast as she could go 70 miles out on Long Island to the home of Governor Moore of the whole province at that time. And she was so eloquent in her plea that he granted her a reprieve for her husband. Then she had to get back to Poughkeepsie. So she rode as fast as she could. She must have exchanged horses at the different stage stops along the way, because she never could have found a horse that could go at that rate of speed. And she got back to Poughkeepsie just 1/2 hour before her husband was to be hung. And she had his reprieve, so he was pardoned. And she didn't know that there were 300 of his followers that were hidden behind the bushes. And one of them had volunteered to be the hangman. And he had fixed that rope so that William would go right down through onto the bottom of the gallows there, and all his friends would rush up and claim his body. But they didn't have to do that. He got the reprieve. Wouldn't that make a wonderful movie, folks? Boy. Well, time went on, and in 1714, there were only 60 householders in the county. And the pioneer, in 1750, the pioneer settlers began to come in really in large numbers. And of course, there were not many of them either, but they set up their farms in such a wonderful way that they were almost entirely self-sufficient. And that meant they could stand in the Revolution. They hadn't thought of that yet. And the villages were far apart, so the minister used to ride around on what he called a circuit, going from place to place and village to village. And there was this minister that came along one day, and he noticed when he was right by a nice farm that his horse was giving out. So he stopped at the farm, and he asked the farmer if he would give him another horse for his horse and $20. And the farmer did, and he put the saddle on the new fresh horse and started on. He hadn't gone very far when he looked back, and here was the farmer coming after him, lickety-split on another horse, and rode along with him. And he said, "Preacher, I trained that horse you're riding specially. He won't stop if you say, whoa, whoa, he won't stop. You've got to say, amen, and then he'll stop. And if you want him to go, if you say, giddy up, he won't go. You've got to say, praise the Lord, and he'll go." So the minister said, "Well, that's just fine." And he went on. Of course, the roads in those days were not much more than trails, and he got off the trail. And all of a sudden he looked ahead, and there was a cliff almost in front of him. He said, "Ho, ho, ho," but the horse wouldn't stop, and just on the edge of the cliff, he thought, and he said, "Amen," and the horse stopped. He was so relieved, he gave a sigh of relief, mopped his brow, and he said, "Praise the Lord." Well, the pioneer settlers, your era was very good. And it went on, and the Dutchess County raised a lot of grain and everything. I mean, and that the settlers did. They got things going pretty good. And then came, in 1775, it came the Revolutionary War. And it dragged on and on and on, got to be 1780. And Benedict Arnold, the most brilliant general that George Washington had, the one who turned the tide in favor of the Americans at Saratoga, was really the leader and the greatest help that Washington had. Well, he was sick and tired of the revolution going on, and he thought it should be ended. And his wife rather encouraging in that she was pro-British. Well, he got an idea that he would give the specifications and everything about West Point Fort. Of course, it didn't have the academy or anything like that there then, but it was a very strategic place where if anybody controlled the fort, they could cut off the American supplies up the Hudson. And they could separate the colony. And also, he thought if he could make some kind of an idea that he could trap George Washington, and he could send those fortifications through to the British lines, and somebody could come with a group of the British soldiers and take over the fort, cut the colony supply route, and capture George Washington. That would be the very end of the war. So he sent word to the British lines that he didn't have a messenger that he could possibly trust to take those very special papers to the British officers. And would they send a messenger? So they sent over Major Andre, very nice young man, who came over, and he got through to General Benedict Arnold, who met him outside the fort and sort of in the woods, and gave him the specifications and everything necessary for the capture of West Point Fort. And Andre put them in his boots. Well, he started back to the British lines, and he was going past a place sort of like a knoll where there were 3 American militiamen playing cards. They were just waiting for something to happen. And they saw this fella on an old farm horse and old farm clothes. And then one of them happened to look down at his feet, and they saw that he had beautiful riding boots that could never be purchased in this part of the country. And so they stopped him, took off his boots, and found the specifications and all the papers. And only one of those 3 men could read. Otherwise, Andre would have got away with it. And wasn't that dramatic? Because then the American officials took Andre as a spy, and he was hung. And Benedict Arnold, of course, heard the news. Bad news travels fast. And he got over to the Hudson and got on a British vessel that was appropriately named the Vulture, and got away. But look, if that treason had succeeded, we wouldn't be living in America today. Just look how the Lord saved us just by one man who could read and saved by a boot. If that guy had put on his old boots, they would have never stopped him. Wouldn't that make a nice movie, folks? Mm-hmm. I think it would. Yeah. Well, after the Revolution, the land was well cleared then, and the grain period, the great grain period began, because the soil was very fertile in Dutchess County, and it was very well watered, but they had no cash crops. But now that they had the grain, they could send that to Poughkeepsie and to boats that would be on the Hudson. And then they made a lot of money those days. And I read in the old paper somewhere that it wasn't unusual to see 100 wagons rumbling down the road loaded with grain to go to Poughkeepsie. Well, that very prosperous period continued until 1825, when the Erie Canal was completed, and the farmers in the north were able to compete with the farmers in the south. So they lost so many of their markets that for a while they didn't have too much. But the land, has been a beautiful land, and way back it was They had bison here and deer and all kinds of animals, and they were here quite a while. And they had wolves, and all the people and farmers decided to exterminate the wolves because they were afraid they would attack the people. But I hear there's still wolves in Dutchess County, but never fear, I hear they're only two-legged ones. And so then a great thing happened for Dutchess County later on. George Hunter Brown, a wealthy New York businessman, was a member of Brown Brothers, bankers and brokers, came up to Dutchess County, right up here in the town of Washington, for his health, because right where we're sitting now, he said it was 965 feet above sea level. I didn't measure it, but I'll take his word for it, because he improved in health. And he noticed that the farmers around in Dutchess County had no regular income. So he decided that they should have a railroad. He organized the Newburgh, Dutchess, and Columbia Railroad Company and started to build the railroad through Dutchess County. It came through Burbank in about 1865 or 6 and up along through what is later South Millbrook in 67, and up when they got up to Millbrook, they needed another station. Somebody wanted to have it named after the farm, 2 farms that Mr. George Hunter Brown owned. So they thought, oh, what a great man he was. So they named it Millbrook in honor of him. And he then, when the railroad went through, that really brought Dutchess County out of the wilderness years. And George Hunter Brown, in 1870, built a milk factory over on the stream that ran down through Hart's Village. And then the farmers really had it made. And the dairy farms were greatly increased, and the profits were very good. And over in the Grainsville, there was a creamery. And in those days, they used to go round, men used to go round on a roof, and they'd take the milk and the butter to a household, and the lady would come out with her own dish and whatever she wanted, and they'd ladle the milk out of the cans into whatever dish the housewives had brought. Well, there was one man, Nelson Daly, who had a cute little dog, Wiggles, who was a black Cocker Spaniel. So when Daly went on his rounds and through the Grainsville and up to Poughkeepsie, 5 days, 6 days a week, but not any, he never went on Sunday. Well, Wiggles he couldn't put up with that. He thought people needed milk and butter every day. So Wiggles, the little dog, used to go over the route all by himself, just wiggle his tail when he came to a house he thought they should have had butter for. And then, of course, with all the milk being sent to New York City, people were not very careful about it. In some places in New York, we found that it was that sold 2 quarts of milk to 2 quarts of water in a gallon of milk. And they put everything you could think of, molasses and anything they thought would dilute the milk. And the cows weren't kept very well, and they got tuberculosis and got in the milk, and lots of children got that. But the Board of Health went to work and cleaned up the dairy business, and it went along very, very prosperously. So you see, it wasn't all skittles and beer for those people in the early days, but they overcame all their difficulties and came out ahead of the game And I know that the people living in Dutchess County will do the same. They'll solve their problems, and they will come out on top. Well, then, when the railroad came, the county began an industry too. Agriculture and industry became very great, and the population increased greatly. And between the 1920 and 1930, in that decade, the population increased more than any any decade in the whole history of Dutchess County. And foreign people came over, and all kinds of people, and they all lived together good like they do now, and it went on prosperously. And then automobiles came along, and better roads had to be built, and then the summer boarders were used to come up on the railroad and in the summertime and stay all summer, got automobiles, and the trucks took the milk, and the trains were no longer needed. And then the people that lived in the city that used to come out in the summertime as summer boarders, now with their automobiles, they built houses out here. And we began the great period of urbanization. And as far as I can see, it's still going on. And I think that we are stronger and better, and we have some very good brains in the county. I can tell by just looking around here. And so I thought it would be beautiful if we could have all next year a lovely celebration of the birthday of Dutchess County in 1683, and 300 years up to 1983. And I thought one of the nicest things we could have the most fun doing would be to have a beautiful big parade with each county having its own unit. And if they happen to have a lot of Polish people, they could dance in costume, have it like the Nazi Day parade, where they went along and each group would put on its own show. And then it could be of the people, for the people, and by the people, with apologies to Abe Lincoln. You know, everybody could take part in it. And we could have a lovely time. And then, of course, they could have, I thought of floats, too. Communities could have floats, and, for instance, an old singing school, or an old-time county fair would be lots of fun. You know, with a merry-go-round, ever ride on a merry-go-round, and cotton candy to eat, and things like that. And we could have a parade of the old-fashioned automobiles, or they could be in a regular big parade. It'd be lovely to have a parade down the Hudson River with all the old-time boats. And then, if we could, I would love to see a videotape made of the parade. And each unit would have a spokesman. For instance, like the Italians would have their beautiful costumes and dance, but one of them would tell when and why in about 5 minutes, you know, the early history of the Italians in the county. And they've been great people. You know, we're going to have a St. Patrick's Day dinner on the 17th. And I hear we're going to have spaghetti and meatballs. But did you know that St. Patrick was honestly actually an Italian? He was captured by the pirates when he was a young man. And he was taken over to Ireland and sold as a slave. And after 5 years, he managed to get his, to escape. And he got back to France and went into a monastery, and he became a priest, and he went back to Ireland. And they said he chased all the snakes out of Ireland. I felt kind of bad when I heard that, because I like snakes, believe it or not. And then I was listening to the television one day, and a priest was talking, and he said the snakes were not actual reptiles, but what St. Patrick meant was that they were the heresies, the wrong ideas of religion that had got in, and he drove those out and purified the religion. So, but I wouldn't mind if he wasn't an Italian. I'd eat the spaghetti and meatballs just the same, you know. But that's sort of nice, isn't it? And let me see. Of course, I heard about Morristown that it had a big celebration a while ago, and it had a float or a truck or something with dancers in medieval costumes, and they went all around, and when they get out on a village green and start to dance, the people must have felt like something like the Indians that saw the half moon. They must have thought somebody had come down from Mars or something. But they really had a big time doing that. That would be fun. And I think we're headed for a lovely time when we won't have to worry about the bad reports and all that. And we know that God is with us. Look how he saved us by a boot and one man who could read. And he'll be there, and he'll help us now. You know, the world is going to end tonight, but that's all phony baloney. I don't know where some scientists want to make a lot of money with a big, wild story, you know. The planets change every once in a while, they have to, but that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. And so, well, anyway, I'm so glad you dear people came tonight. And I'm very honored. And now, if there's anybody in this room who would like to speak a few words on the subject, I guess I use them mostly up, but maybe if there's somebody who wants to speak a few words, I'd love to have them do it. How about it, Charlie?
You are not going to be disappointed, I am sure.
Thank you.
Just to interrupt for 1 minute, when Louise spoke to you about the milk factory being built down here, some of us know where it was and some of us don't. Ella, minus Bert, and George sent some old snapshots of the rebuilding of the bridge down by the milk factory. There was a covered bridge down there which they replaced with the present one in 1929. And here is a picture of the milk factory and the trestle. And here is a picture of the covered bridge. And here is a picture of the new bridge after it was completed. And I have 3 or 4 of those different viewpoints on it. And this is the dam, the floating bridge in the tree there. And this is, the bridge is under construction, and you see the ice house on the corner down there. So I'm just going to leave these here. We're going to keep these on file, but maybe some of you people would like to look at them. And these are by courtesy of Ella and George Birth. Now, I would like to say that we are particularly honored tonight by the presence of 2 of our very lovely county people, Mrs. Joyce Gee, our county historian, and Mrs. Lucille Patterson, our county executive. And Mrs. Patterson, would you like to add a few words to the group for us? Please, thank you.
How can you add anything to what Louise said? I must tell you, though, that the weather is quite bad tonight, and I wasn't going to come out because I go from here to another meeting. But I got the most lovely letter today, Louise, from you. And she invited me, actually it was, I think, the 3rd invitation to make sure I got out there tonight. And I thought I would like to join you for just a few minutes and hear what you have to say. The Tercentenary Committee is well underway for the county with Joyce B. at its head, and she can tell you a great deal more about our plans. I say our as a county, because they're not my plans, and they're not Joyce's plans. They're plans, I think, for an appropriate celebration. And my only concern after listening to Louise for the evening is how can we possibly do everything and properly celebrate this and live up to her standards and her spirit. But we shall certainly do everything we can, Louise. And I thought it might be proper if you could spare a few minutes for Joyce to bring you up to date. We are in the business of trying to put money together for a proper celebration, and we don't like to think that celebrations have to cost a terrible amount of money, but they do cost some money. And we have had some degree of success, and those plans are underway. And Joyce, you may just, Joyce is slightly briefer usually than Louise in her, though not always, in her definitive approach to whatever has to be done. I think you probably all know Joyce, and if you don't say hello to her and let her tell you a bit, if you have the time.
We have the time, and we are very honored to have both of you with us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do plan on being brief because as Lucille's pointed out, the weather really was very bad. I don't know what it was like when you folks came in, but by the time that we arrived a few minutes ago, it's really getting very bad. So I'm going to try to bring you up to date very briefly. A lot of the ideas that Louise has expressed tonight are things that the committee has seriously considered. We have a draft of a plan that I've been kind of cheerleading about the county, passing it under people's nose and asking them to comment on it. That includes a lot of the things that Louise has been talking about.
Good.
Parades,
Hooray.
videotapes, conferences, opportunities for us to develop recent scholarship on things that people perhaps have known something about but might like to do some more research on. Inventories of records, updating of records. We are hoping that by the end of 1983 that it will not have just been a kind of an orgy of pleasure seeking that we've gone through, but that we'll end up with the county kind of having reassessed its treasures. We've been a very modest county about our pleasures and our treasures. I think particularly the eastern portion of the county. The river gets a lot of focus, but you folks over here beyond the Taconic, I think, need to have a little bit more of the limelight. And I'm hoping that you'll develop your own ideas about the things that you think are important. You live here. I do live on the river, so that I've come to visit this area frequently. My family comes from this area. My mother was a Tompkins.
What? Now I understand.
So I think I must have relatives around here somewhere. But I know that this side of the Dutchess has as much to offer as the riverside. I hope you'll do some thinking about the kinds of things that you would like to present this time, because I think that the Tercentenary can be a forum for us all to explore our values, our riches, our historical past. I'm not going to tell us, as Lucille has pointed out, I'm not going to tell people what it is that we should be celebrating at this point. We ought to know what it is that is important to us. And unless all of us, every single one of us, makes an expression of what it is that's important at this point, then something will be lacking in the celebration. I have a lot more people that I need to talk with, listen to, before the plans are complete. But I want to listen to you. Lucille has done something I think that no other county executive has done before. She's given the historian an office and a telephone and a way of keeping in touch with people.
Wonderful.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
I'm at the county office building on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm in the Bureau of Veterans Affairs. I still don't have a sign yet, but I'll get that eventually. And maybe next year I might even have a telephone that's listed in the telephone directory. But Louise knows where to find me. And if you just try just the least little bit, you'll locate me in the county office building on those days. So if you have any comments at all, any complaints, anything that I should know about, please do talk to me about it. Tell me about it, and I'll make sure that the messages get to where they should go. Dutchess County is celebrating its 300th anniversary. We're not the only people who are having this anniversary. There are 9 other counties in New York State. Then there is also Dukes County in Massachusetts that was part of the original province, and Cornwall in Maine. So we're really part of a Northeastern celebration. It's a wonderful opportunity to explore our heritage and what we share in common with each other, and to even enjoy our differences. As I said, the weather's bad. I'm not going to take any more of your time. If you have any questions, please direct them to me. If you have any comments, please direct them to me. If you have any wonderful ideas, share them with Louise, who is a member of the Church Centenary Advisory Committee, and also is our liaison person for the town, and she'll be sure to pass things on.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, George, down at the bottom of my chair here, I got a beautiful red book that you made. Didn't you bring that to me?
Yes, I did.
You're
going to embarrass me. Don't do that.
I long to have one made for the town of Washington. I got it with me, so if anybody wants to see it. And I got also a book of the Grange down in the Grange in the year's history. And I thought that for the town of Washington, somebody with lots of pictures could make up one.
There's lots of talent in all of our towns, so I bet you there's somebody who would like to do something like that for Washington.
I think it'd be very interesting. And if we could get a videotape of these parades or whatever good things you have, we'd have a history book, a picture book forever of this.
Right? We're going to do that. I'm sure we're going to do that.
At least some of it, you know?
I think you have a question?
I have a comment, appropriate, I think, at this time. I'm Mary Charlemagne. My husband and I live in Commerce, and she runs over the New York school system. We are writing a book. We have a publisher, Pictorial History of Dutchess County. And our deadline for the publisher is the end of April. We are moving along, coming into the home stretch, but the further we go, the more we find we'd like to include, and some of the historical societies, which are remain nameless at this point, have not been too cooperative in wanting to have their area represented. So I have to really nag and keep calling and keep hounding these people if they want their township represented in our book. We'd like to hear from them. What we are interested in doing and what we are doing is collecting photographs, old photographs, showing the townships as they grow. We are not interested in doing stately homes. It has been done and done very, very well. So what our emphasis is on people in the area doing things, their daily lives, their daily activities. Children going to school, men out in the fields, women in their homes, small businesses, beginning, anything of that nature is what we are really looking for. Many of the townships have been most cooperative. I've had a wonderful time with the Dutchess County Historical Society. We do our own photocopying, and we are also, we've had good times and wonderful success at Adrian's in the local history fund. Through them, I have come in contact with many people in the area who are willing to share their family albums. This is the kind of thing we're looking for. Pictures that haven't ever been published before. Pictures that have